I'm the director of Beaufort Financial down in Reading. I'm just going to talk to you today very briefly about who Beaufort are. But the unprecedented times that we're living in, volatility is not a new scenario, believe it or not, and then planning for the future. Dave and I are going to interlink with the presentation, so there'll be still people trying to log on. Sorry, there'll be kind of apart from Dave, apart from me, and we'll go backwards and forwards. So please do ask questions as we go along. This is a very informal discussion, and as I say, we want you to participate as best you can. So I'm very aware that quite a lot of you are aware of who Beaufort are already, so I don't intend to drag on too much with that. But we celebrate our 10th birthday next year, which is a bit of a big deal for us. And I know some of you have actually been there all along the way, which is, yeah, very, makes us all very proud. Some of those dropping in as we speak. So, yeah, thank you for all your support over the last 10 years. We've grown as a business. We very much focus on collaboration, working with other professionals, and trying to provide our clients with the best advice, and hopefully put them in front of the right people. So we've got long trusted connections with professionals and our clients, and long may that continue. So generally from myself and all the team, thank you for your support over the last 10 years. It means a great deal, and we certainly wouldn't be here without you. So thank you very much. This is a slide that I saw, which I thought was very relevant in terms of unprecedented times. And I'll just leave it on the screen. There's been lots of talk, lots of chat in the financial press, on the news every day in terms of unprecedented times. The thing that's very different this time clearly is the fact that we weren't given the chance to prepare. Businesses didn't have a year ahead to see possibly what was happening. Things were slowing down. This has really been a case of the world has put the brakes on, and we've all had to adjust very quickly. And that includes financial markets too. So hence the word unprecedented times. Oh, someone else is still coming through. Apologies. Trying to multitask was not my strength. Right. Okay. So this is actually what did happen in terms of the markets. So in terms of the peak, and again, I'm aware I've had lots of conversations with lots of clients over the last 10, 12 weeks, and their range of emotions has changed significantly over that period of time. But what happened really was, from the peak of February 2020, the markets fell by about 30% over a 16-day period. The last time that happened was back in the Great Depression, which shows you the speed of things that, you know, that took place from the highs to where they are now. And what that really was a result in was one thing and one thing only, and that was fear, the unknown. People were unsure of actually what this meant to them. And this is a really good way of showing actually people's perspective in terms of the markets. It's funny how when markets are high, people obviously would like to go into the market because they've seen the markets grow. And therefore, there's I suppose greed is an interesting word, but there's the potential to make money clearly in people's heads. And therefore, at the beginning of the year, people were very bullish about, you know, what the outcome would look like. In terms of as things started to slow down and the COVID virus started to hit all of us, that became slightly more conservative, I think is the way to look at it. And by the 23rd of March, when the markets hit their all-time low, then, you know, actually fear was all that was in place. People wanted to get out. People weren't sure what to do. And the market was falling on a daily basis by 3, 4, 5%. And people were looking for a safe haven. The issue obviously is the fact that, you know, when you come out of the markets, what happens to the returns on your capital? But if it helps you sleep at night, if the right place to put the money is in the bank, then that's the right place for you to be at that particular time. In terms of where that's come back to now, it's bounced up slightly. We're now more to back to where we were back in February, more of a neutral place. So around a 50% on that factor in terms of where clients have gone. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster. You know, emotion plays a massive part in people's finances, which I completely understand. But if you look at the last 2 to 3 years, you can see this isn't a new scenario. There have been ups and downs. This graph clearly shows people, I guess, moving with the times. And, you know, we can't underestimate the effect emotion has a part to play in this. But it's worth bearing in mind that volatility is not a new thing in stock markets. hence the risk involved in, I guess, going into those, and why we ask the questionnaires for attitude to risk and where you're most comfortable and capacity for loss and so on. It's quite a busy graph, this one, unfortunately, sorry, but you will get copies of all these. But what it does show you is throughout the calendar years, how there's been changes in markets and where they've ended up over that period of time. The one that would kind of spring to mind would be, certainly when I remember vividly, 2008, 2009, how the markets fell by over 40% potentially over that year. The following year made the vast majority of that back in terms of 25% the following year. And usually there is some sort of recovery relatively quickly if you look at historical data. Again, I'm very aware of my unprecedented times comment at the beginning, and we're living in this new normal. But I guess the scenario is going to be, if we have a recovery, when we have a recovery, what will that recovery look like? The Bank of England Chancellor relatively recently mentioned a V shape, which is obviously the preferred option for all of us. May it be a W? Is it a U? Could it be an L? I'm kind of running out of letters. I need to find some acronym that kind of work on those. But I think we all agree there will be a recovery. It's just a case of how long. Now, this again is a very busy graph, so apologies, but just got some data looking at, if you'd invested in the stock market, £10,000 in the UK stock market back in 1990, and you took your money out on the 1st of January this year, you'd have actually achieved over £102,000. So your £10,000 became £102,000, giving you a return, if you analyse that, of 8% a year, which I think you agree is not too shabby. If you were to look at America, which we often do, then realistically that almost, well, in fact it does double, becomes £210,000 from a £10,000 start 30 years ago. So I'm not trying to underplay what's going on in the world. We're all affected personally by this, but if we're in it for the long game, then you can see there are the returns to be made there potentially. Any questions so far? Everyone okay so far? I'm assuming that's a yes, Dave, because I can't see any questions, so I'm going to just keep ploughing on. Now, this is really interesting. And again, what we've had is a number of people, some sitting on the sidelines, some invested, and some unsure where they should currently be invested. And I guess trying to find the time to be in the market, which I think out of anything is one of the hardest things to do. And this just kind of shows that fact. If you'd invested in the FTSE All Share 20 years ago and just left your money fully invested, the net £10,000 would grow to over 30. But if you missed the best 10 days of that halves. Again, 15 and so on to 25. So once you are, I guess, on the sidelines, once you're out, when to get back in again is that million-dollar question. And I think that out of anything really emphasises the fact that remaining in the markets, if at all possible, is the way to go. And this is just one last thing before I just pass back to Dave, I think, is the idea from here. So I was just looking through some facts and figures over the last week or so, and I was kind of, I guess, relatively encouraged, but surprised as well to a certain degree. If you look at this, there's been over £2 billion has gone into the markets, almost $3 billion in the month of April in terms of going back into the markets. Now you've already seen the markets have started to rise over the last 6 weeks or so. But there's been huge demand for global equities and UK equities as well. There clearly is money sitting on the side, call it pent-up demand, call it what you will. I think there are people looking to benefit from the upside of the markets going forward. And if you would have done, which had taken a very brave person to do, if you'd have gone into the markets on the 23rd of March and sat back yesterday and looked where you were, you'd had a return of 27% on the FTSE 100. Now, that's relatively staggering in my opinion from that perspective. We've dealt with a lot of clients in the last 3 months. We're still very much here for our clients via Zoom rather than physically, but we're still talking to a lot of people. And the vast majority of people I've been speaking to over a 12-month period have either more or less stood still or made a very slight gain over that period of time, depending on your risk profile. But that just goes to show again, I hope in a very sort of whistle-stop tour that things hopefully aren't as bad as you as you thought they were. And I would definitely encourage you to talk to your advisor to have a review of what you've got and hopefully put your minds at rest just slightly. So I think, Dave, that kind of lines up to where I need to hand over to you, which I'm going to stop sharing my screen, multitask, and pass over to the to Dave Gammon. So any questions, please do ask as we go along.
Okay, so hopefully you can now see what looks like a very colourful colourful slide in front of you. So just to introduce myself, for those of you that don't know me, I know some of my clients are on here, so I've got some friends on here, but this is my career in a single slide. I started off as a 16-year-old T-boy at the Department of Trade and Industry, and I ended up being a business coach, helping businesses like Mark's and other SMEs in the area with business growth and leadership development. So I was out on my morning bike ride this morning. I was thinking, okay, well, I'm speaking to people who aren't necessarily running businesses. So what's the commonality between running a business and investing? And of course, the word that keeps coming up, and interestingly, a word that's played a very significant part in my career, is this idea of risk. So I spent 15 years of my career, and 5 of those as director of risk management in telecoms companies, but also as a head of internal audit. So I kind of understand this notion of risk. And but in the last 10 years particularly, I'm really more interested in the psychology and the mindset behind what drives risk, because risk in linguistic terms is what we call a nominalization. It's a word for something that doesn't actually exist, except in the mind of the beholder. So in common with my business owning clients, all of you as investors will have a particular sense of what risk is. And it's unique to you. But the thing that it has in common for all of us is that risk primarily is driven by our sense of familiarity or unfamiliarity with what is going on around us. So the more familiar we are with our environment, the less we're likely to have a sensation of risk, if you like, or a perception of risk. And similarly, the same goes for our sort of potential for failure. You know, risk shows up in our body, you know, as a felt sensation when we're exposed to things where potentially failure is an option that is on the table. So with the markets as they are at the moment, you can understand why there's a lot of muddy thinking going on. And, you know, my job as a business coach and as someone who works in the space of leadership development is to help people understand where that muddy thinking comes from and to calm them the hell down when their thinking is beginning to run away with them. And you know, I know talking to Mark, you know, many of his clients have expressed a great degree of anxiety. So one of my clients actually, for the first day after lockdown, he was on the phone. I knew he would be. I could almost predict that the phone was going to ring. We need an urgent conference call, Dave. We need to talk about what we're going to do. I think we may have to make some people redundant, do this, that. And the reason I knew he was going to call is he did the same thing after the referendum vote the very next day. So we got on a conference call and we talked about his response and his thinking. And actually, you know, his business has flown through this lockdown. It's absolutely, his sales have almost doubled. And yet he was on the verge of kind of folding it all in, not folding the business in, but cutting the business right back to bare bone. And actually, that would have been a catastrophic mistake. So this idea of is caught up in this fear response. So just so you know your enemy here, when we're talking about this kind of what risk means to you, it's a biological response that you're feeling. It's a survival instinct. You know, in the face of unfamiliarity, we become anxious about our potential to survive. We're conscious of the presence of potential danger, and we get a felt expression to that. Some of you might know it as that fight, flight, freeze kind of reaction that happens in our body. So, and it's not a very resourceful state from which to make really good decisions. So, you know, if you're in that state of anxiety, the first thing I do as a coach is move people away from that position so that we can have a more sensible discussion. So, as you're all sitting here, even listening to this webinar now, you will all have a different perception and sense of what's going on with your financial situation. And most of it is, and it will be utterly unique to each one of you, even those of you I can see on my screen that are sat next to other people, you'll both be having a completely different experience of this. And that's because, you know, your reality, if you like, is unique to you. It's a program you built from the age of between 2 and 7. So even what you think about money and how you think about cash and investment is largely. Sorry, I just got some. Could we mute if you're on? Not. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so you get that this kind of sense is unique to you. It's a reality is a construct you. There we go. So hopefully you can hear me. Can you just give me a nod, Mark, if I'm still online? Perfect. So all of this stuff, and particularly your attitude towards money, is largely a function of what you learned up to the age of about 7 years old. And again, it's absolutely unique to you. So I have an older brother. He's 15 years older than me. And about 20 years ago, I went round his house on a Saturday morning. Bear in mind, we both brought up in the same house. And we got talking about sports cars because I'd just gone and bought one. I literally woke up on the Friday and decided it was time for a new car. And by Saturday morning, I'd committed and bought a brand new sports car. I went round his house and he sat there in a state of absolute consternation with me, and then dragged a file out from under his settee, which was brochures that he'd been looking at for 2 years, trying to make his mind up about a sports car. Now, we were brought up in the same family. This gives you a sense of just how individually each one of us perceive reality and perceive money and investments, quite personal things. So the challenge, if you like, in a period like this, is you have to learn to perform, to make decisions and take actions in the face of this uncertainty. And this is the model you can see in front of you now. This model is exactly the model I use to teach people how to become better leaders in their business. You know, so you have to become more situationally aware of what's going on around you. And it's really good to hear from Mark at the opening of this discussion today, where he took you through some new information, some of which you may not have seen, that can possibly reshape your sense of the situation. You still need to be holding some sort of desired outcome. There is something you should be aiming towards, and so that you have a navigating point to get you through this uncertain time. You need the right relationships around you now. You need advisors. You need people like Mark. And if you're running a business, people, you know, somebody like myself that can challenge what you're doing and get much richer, stronger decisions out from you. You need to take action. You know, there will be things you will need to do now. And you also need a protocol, if you like, for measuring and adjusting your progress as you go forward now. And all of that is wrapped up in your identity and your state of mind in the moment. So being aware that whatever you're thinking and perceiving and whatever decisions you're making, your state of mind in that moment is playing a big part in that decision making. What Mark referred to earlier as that emotional component of investment. And you need to be careful that that's well calibrated, particularly at a time like this, because it's very easy to panic. You know, so I hope if there's one thing here, it's kind of, you can calm down a little bit and just take your time with this. You know, don't do what one of my clients potentially did, which was drive their business in the ground at the very time it would have needed to be at its strongest. So this brings us to a bit of a paradox, if you like. So the handsome gentleman you see on your screen in front of you now is a gentleman by the name of Jim Stockdale. My clients will probably almost all know this story, but for those of you that don't, Jim Stockdale was the most senior ranking officer in the US Navy who was captured in the Vietnam War. He was an a Navy pilot, and he was shot down and he was held for 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton, which was one of the most barbaric prisoner of war camps in Vietnam. And there was no special treatment for officers from what he described. But one of the things Jim Stockdale was asked when he got home was, who were the people that survived? You imagine being in that sort of environment for 7 years. And he said something interesting. He said, the pessimists and the optimists never made it. He said the optimists got their heads so full of, oh, we'll be out by Christmas, we'll be out by Easter, we'll be out by summer, and they gave up when they constantly were disappointed. And similarly, the pessimists just gave up the will to live because they couldn't see that there was a way out of their situation. So the Stockdale paradox, which is what I'm asking you to consider in terms of your own investments now, is the idea that you must never confuse the faith that ultimately we will come out of this in some shape or form. You must never confuse that with the discipline you need to confront the brutal reality of where you are now. And the reason I really wanted to get this across to you today was Mark was telling me how many of his clients are kind of, I guess you might call it ostrich mentality, are sticking their head in the sand and don't want to look at the numbers. They're frightened to, but you know, the most important thing for you now is your ability to understand the reality of where you are so that you could begin to make some sensible decisions and actions that will move you forward. And at this point, I'm going to hand back to Mark, who will talk to you about how Beaufort go about doing that. And some of you I know will have been through that experience, but it's worth just recapping on. So Mark, I'm going to stop if I can find my... You're on mute, Mark, by the way. Mark, you need to unmute yourself.
I'm muted. Sorry, apologies. We're getting there, one day at a time. Modern technology. Hope everyone's with us so far and found it useful. I love that Stockdale, that story. I think it's fantastic. This leads us nicely into, I guess, what we've done hopefully for quite a few of our clients, and certainly would like to going forward. We've all been through it in some way, shape or form in terms of, I guess, now working out what your plans are for the short and the long term. I guess I've got clients, and we all have clients at Beaufort in each of these scenarios that have either done so now or are looking to do these things in the future, and clearly not one size fits all. It is fascinating how the world has changed in terms of us working from home. Our offices, you know, still going to be needed as much. We've managed to deal with that. Commuting is no longer there. We're saving money sometimes by doing that, but I guess spending money in other ways. And spending time with the family has definitely been something that I've never done as much of. And I guess that gives us an opportunity to work out the long-term plan to a certain degree. So this is what we try and do for all of our clients, whether you run a business or look into retirement or just free up some time for you. So the clients we've got here are Alan and Carol, who I hasten to add are not on the call today. And they own a business, a trampoline business called Jumping Jacks. Which clearly hasn't been used a great deal over the last 3 months, but hopefully will in the future. They've got 3 children, and they are looking to help them over the long term with regards to university fees, house deposits in the future. And their plan is to retire at 60. And they need to understand have they got enough in the pot to do so. They've saved into pensions via the business. They've got some savings and investments. I won't go too much into the detail, but broadly they spend what they bring in is roughly how it works. And what we've got here with the timeline is quite a busy timeline in terms of we're starting in 2020. The one thing we don't know is, for want of a better phrase, when they move upstairs. We've assumed the age of 90 or close their eyes. I thought was quite a good one I've heard recently. But there's quite a lot going on over the next 10 years before they retire in terms of helping their children with house deposits, say university fees and so on from that perspective. So that's kind of where their plan would be. This is very much a blank canvas for everyone. You know, everyone, as Dave alluded to earlier on, no one has the same idea. We don't have one size fits all. If you don't want it, next door does scenario. It's a case of we try and fit the plan to you guys. And what this shows here then is, again, the colours work for me. This is them having their working life, this kind of blue colour here. And the black line you can see across all these lines here is their total expenditure. So what we're saying is for the next 10 years or so, there's broadly enough coming in from all their resources to cover their expenditure. There's actually some years where there's not as much, I guess, where the university fees and school fees aren't there. And then they've got assets of some description, whether it be pensions or rental income or savings, to make sure they don't run out of money until they're 78. They'll still have a house at 78. They'll still have their health, hopefully, at 78, and their children as well. They won't have any liquid assets. So in order for them to retire at 60, we need to work out what they need to do. And what we're able to do here is actually work out, they have a business, that's valued at a certain amount. They think it's worth about £1 million currently. We've worked out that if they got to 60 and sold that business for near as damn it £1 million and literally just left that money in the bank for the rest of their lives, they'd never run out of money. So they could retire at 60 and do everything they wanted to do. Their standard of living would not be altered in any way, and they would continue from that perspective. Clearly, there's a number of options we can have here. We can look at, do they go earlier? Do they work later? Can they pay into certain other areas, i.e. pensions, for example, to try and make up this shortfall? And this is the idea that we can sit down with our clients. So this isn't selling a product, this is building a plan, which is really important. And that's where your solicitor, your accountant, your business coach would also come alongside here. Your bank, to a certain degree, could all be involved in this process. And that's where we feel we get the most, well, I suppose, the best outcome for our clients. By doing this, by working together. I don't think there's much worse than a client having 3 different opinions from 3 different professionals and trying to work out which is the one to go with. I think if you can all agree at outset, from a professional perspective, what the client needs, what they are trying to attain, and how to get there as a combined, then the client is going to get by far a better result than people trying to score points off each other, which is certainly something we are 100% involved with. I think that's me, Dave. I think I'm back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm just going to call my screen back up again. Right. So what Mark's just described there, and I remember the first time Mark showed me this model, because it's pretty much what I use with clients when I'm working with their businesses as well, which is this idea that there is somewhere you are aiming at and there is somewhere you are now. And it's the tension between those 2 points and the path of least resistance to them. So Mark paints this financial landscape for people to be so that they can begin to map their path forward. And I do the same in business. I call it a blueprint. What I find interesting is, though, I can sit with someone, we can work out the blueprint to get their business from A to B, or to get their financial investment from A to B. But I still have to overcome their internal resistance, which is, again, is a function of that fear response, that what if it doesn't work? This is unfamiliar to me. This is new territory. So part of my job is to get people to move into that space. And what I found is you really have to have that level of tension between where you are now and where you want to be. And if that tension isn't in place, you won't be motivated to take difficult decisions, or what appear to look like difficult decisions. Now, one of the interesting things I think as we go through this period, reflecting on my own experience in lockdown, and I know for my clients and for many other people, is people are beginning to think slightly differently about what's important and what's not important. Well, I don't think we're on the cusp of some human revolution, but we are certainly beginning to recalibrate what's important in our position. So, what I'm offering you here is the number in Mark's plan may have changed. It may have changed. You may be looking at your finances differently now. And again, it's no good having something you're aiming for if actually there's not enough motivation in that aiming point to make you do what you need to do. And that has to combine with the where are you now, the brutal reality. Because, I don't really care when I'm working with businesses, I don't really care where their motivation comes from. I don't care if it comes from the fact that they're in a bad place now, or it's that they have a great vision of a future. All I care about is that they take action. So it's the motivation between these 2 points, that's the tension between these 2 points. And you then, no sooner are you going to execute a financial plan than guess what? Obstacles are going to emerge. I see this in businesses I work with every day. We set out a blueprint, we go to execute it, and then the obstacles come. And it's our ability to keep moving in the face of those obstacles, to keep measuring and adjusting what we're doing and keep ourselves moving forward. That, to me, this is what I do in business, but you can see the parallel in investments as well, is that ability to just keep yourself moving forward, adjust your course, increase your risk profile, decrease your risk profile, shift your timelines, anything that keeps the tension in that system and keeps you moving and keeps you getting towards your ultimate goal. And I guess I finished with this kind of somewhat elongated quote from myself and a friend of mine who's a coach, which is, you know, the biggest challenge for you here is that your primary concern is survival and safety. That's your biological coding in play. But the paradox when you're running a business or you're running your financial investment strategy is that there is no certainty out there. You know, on a personal level, I think this pandemic has been a big shift, but I think there are bigger shifts coming. Some of my clients working in the automation space at the moment and the artificial intelligence space are painting a very different version of the future that, you know, at the moment I can't even get my head around. So the idea that there will ever be certainty or that there ever has been certainty is a myth. You know, it's a mythology that back in the old days, everything felt so safe and secure. Now, I'd argue there's more volatility and more uncertainty moving around at the moment, but it's life. So my one thing for you, you know, my takeaway for you from today is get used to living with uncertainty and unfamiliarity, because I don't think that's a component that's going to disappear from our experience of life. But the paradox, if you like, for you, and the reason people like me earn money by working with people, is that it's only if you take action really that you're going to know whether it's going to work or not. So the great paradox is you're paralyzed by resistance coming from a fear response. But the problem is if you don't take action, the system moves on, the financial markets move on, and you end up where you end up. So if there was one thing I'd plea with everyone on this call today is have your session with Mark or with one of the Beaufort advisors to at least understand where you are now, confront brutal reality, recalibrate your future destination, and start to make some reasoned decisions. And I call that framework Mark uses in my business, I call it the clean action framework, because my job is to remove all of the thinking from it, all of the toxic thinking and the belief systems that are getting in the way of you seeing the world as the world is and making the best call for yourselves. So hopefully that's been useful. On that, I'm going to hand back to Mark. And if there are any questions or anything else that's coming up for people, we can deal with them. You're on mute.
Thanks again,
Mark.
Dave. I've done it again. That's twice. Won't happen again. Won't happen again. Thanks again, Dave. Really useful from that perspective. We'll get better at this, I assure you. We'll get better. In terms of the last thing to say from us, I mean, we would just say that it's important to think about what your plan is right now. I'm just going to share the last slide just so you can see what we're looking to do. This would be the takeaway from our perspective. Really just make sure, is your situation as bad as you feared? I know certainly at the outset, and I can understand why certain people didn't want to look at their plan, didn't want to look at their investments. I get that completely. I can understand why. And possibly, as I say, back in March, the situation, well, not possibly, back in March, the situation did look different. There's no denying that. The stock market had just, the UK market had fallen below 5,000 points. And from day to day, we weren't sure what was going to happen. I remember vividly back in 2008, 2009, waking up every morning and the stock market just falling by another 300 points. And it got down to, I think, 3,300 points, to give you some perspective on where it was. Back then, we didn't know if money was going to be worth anything. People would queue around the block to get money from Northern Rock. I'm sure quite a lot of you remember that. And it was where do we put money? You know, where's it going to be? What's a house going to be worth? Thousands of people were losing their jobs. So uncertainty has been here, and we got through that. I spoke to our chairman recently, Simon Goldthorpe, and he was saying, think about the last 20 years, you know, the significant market shifts we've had, the significant recessions and dot bubble. We've had the global crisis. We've had flu epidemics. We've had a whole range of different things, and we're still here. We're still coming out the other side day by day. So, as Dave very much alluded to, there's going to be uncertainty. There's always going to be something that gets in our way. But as long as we have a plan, we can make sure we get there. This isn't about taking risk. It's about understanding what you've got. That's really important. We're not trying to get you to take more risk in any way, shape or form. So again, I would say, as Dave mentioned, test your thinking. Think about what you're looking to achieve now. Have your goals shifted from where we were? You know, do you need a sports car anymore if you're not driving to the office? Would be one thing to bear in mind. So, you know, is that as important to you as it was? And what is your plan for the future? That's, you know, the three things that we would suggest that you take away from here. We have 22 people that work for us. One of them has currently been in the office for the last 11 weeks. Everyone else has been working remotely, as I know a number of us has. And I know there's a number of business owners actually on here that probably had to deal with the furlough scheme and the government grants and so on that have been coming through and are living and breathing this every single day. So I don't pretend to have all the answers, but we can certainly give you some guidance in terms of how we think you can get to where you need to get to. So I hope that helps in some way, shape or form.